This is American Real. I am Roger Brooks. My guest today is Elaine Jacques. You are a leadership, presence, and leadership development coach who supports mid-career and senior level leaders to hashtag BEMA, become even more amazing, through dividing up their really big goals into the plus 1% action steps that can be implemented starting today. Elaine, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Roger. It's my pleasure and honor to be here with you today.
Well, and we met on LinkedIn. We met through LinkedIn, but actually today is the first day we've actually ever spoken. So it's really interesting for me to watch someone on LinkedIn, to connect with them, and then have them on the show. Because when we see people from afar, we think of one thing, but when we're able to, look into their eyes and talk to them, and what I like to do is share people's stories, it takes it to a whole different level. And that's something you're very used to in your work. So I'd love to talk about that today, Elaine. But before we get started, I wanted to ask you about a recent post you had on LinkedIn. It was of this tree, and the tree was being really thrown over by the wind. Tell us about that post, why you put that up, and the type of, you got really good engagement on that, the effect it had on others.
For me, I'm a very visual person, and so sometimes a particular image will strike me, and I'll start thinking about it. And I think I approach content creation on LinkedIn from the standpoint of if it touches me in a particular way, maybe that'll be true for someone else. And so I post thinking if I can just help one person to either feel like they can make it through another day or they can do the thing that they want to do, then it's worth it to me. So I actually was thinking back, I go walking fairly frequently typically in the early mornings. And I was thinking back to a conversation I had with a friend, and they don't live near the coast. And so they weren't familiar with that trees can look that way. And I started thinking about that. And I thought, it's really interesting that it isn't just the people we surround ourselves with. It's the things that we watch, the things that we listen to, the things that we read that also become a part of what influences us to become the people that we are. And the image of the tree came back to me. So I, of course, went to my favorite image curator, Google, and hunted around for a tree that really spoke to me. And that was the one I chose. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of LinkedIn, you have a tremendous following there. Talk about your journey on LinkedIn, if you can. How long it's taking you to, I think you're over like 75,000 followers at this point. How long has it taken you to build that type of a network? I know a lot of people are really trying hard to build a network on LinkedIn. And I have the opportunity to speak to a lot of people about it. And I'm just curious, as far as your journey, how long have you been doing it, and at this level?
So let's see, I think I got onto LinkedIn either very late in the year in 2016 or very beginning of the year in 2017. So I haven't been on it for very long. And I will tell you, I was, I will use the term encouraged out of respect for the person who did that for me. I would say viciously shoved, but to get onto LinkedIn when I became a coach. And I will say I never have been on social media prior to LinkedIn. LinkedIn is my only social media. And when I became a coach, one of my coaching classmates says, "You have to get onto LinkedIn." And I said, "I don't want to get onto LinkedIn. Don't make me do it." And she said, "No, you have to." And so I think I probably take the prize for how many privacy settings I had on my profile for a really long time, of even if I think you knew who I was in person and you knew every way to get a hold of me, you still couldn't find me on LinkedIn. So that's where I started. I do tend to be on the introverted side of the introvert extrovert scale. So it has been a big journey for me getting more comfortable with that. I will say, out of respect for myself, that as a speech pathologist, and as you can probably see, I'm fairly recognizable, and I happen to be fairly tall as well. And so for personal protective reasons, because of some of the instabilities with some of the patients that I worked with, I maintained zero online presence. So getting online was a huge thing for me, and it has been a really interesting journey. And I like to think that maybe I can inspire other introverts out there to say, you can do this too. But to get back to your question, it hasn't been easy for me. I like to talk about how long it took me to start actually interacting with anyone's posts, because that was a big scary step for me. My big scary goal was, I will react to one person's post today. That's my I can do this. And I think it took me 7 months to actually make a comment, which I can promise you was not insightful at all. I think it was good job or great post or something, completely ambivalent. But I still remember that now. And when people come to my posts and they say thanks or something, I think, if you're one of those introverts out there who are just getting onto LinkedIn, and that was, I'm going to say, an embarrassing amount of time for me to be able to go, can I really comment on someone's post? And to be able to do that, I think of that when I see that on my posts, and I choose to respond to them from that standpoint of, maybe this was a big scary goal for you today. And so I want to honor that and help you become a part of the global conversation that I've had the honor to become a part of as well.
That's so awesome. What a great backstory. But I'm still curious, like, okay, at what point was there a pivotal point where, 'cause I'm on LinkedIn all the time. I have people that help me with LinkedIn. It's a lot of work, right? There's no doubt about that. But
Yeah.
so when did it go from, okay, now I'm comfortable, I'm posting, I'm commenting, to this massive audience?
Well, when I'm comfortable, I don't know that I've achieved that yet. No, I'm kidding. um, so I will tell you that I was taking the body language trainer certification course, and a group of us were in a mastermind together for that. And somewhere along the way, I think you start challenging your friends to do silly and crazy things. And so somewhere, and I'm not going to own who started it, someone said, I bet I can get to 10,000 before, anyone else here. And, we were all at a variety of places at that point. And so that was when I actually figured out, I still don't have my profile set so that you can see my picture unless your first connection's with me. So I think I was at maybe 5,000 at that point. And so I thought, why are people connecting with me? Like, I'm just a little gray circle with my, initials in it. So that was something that I'm going to say I don't necessarily recommend to it. I have garnered a lot of interesting connections from that time frame, where pretty much it was, I'm going to max out the number of connection requests I can make every single day from now until I get to 10,000. So I will say that's how I got to 10,000. I've been a lot more
Strategic.
yes, since then. So I will say, though, that the biggest thing for people wanting to build their network is you have to engage. And I will say, I do all of my own. Every comment you see, if there's a spelling error, that was my fault. I was too tired. And it does take a lot of time. And the amount of time I spent on it has varied widely over the last few years. I'm having to be a little bit more strategic about my time based on other things that are vying for my attention right now. So, but I will say engagement is the biggest thing. I like to give the example of, think of LinkedIn as you go to a party and you walk into the room and people go, oh, hi, it's great to see you. And you go, that's kind of like what doing a post and then not engaging with people's comments on your post is like, is they've come, they've said hi, they said, oh, this is great, I really appreciate you sharing about this. And you just walk away. So I think the term I read was, don't post and ghost. Post with the idea of, I'm starting a conversation. I actually want to have a conversation. I'm not just adding to the noise for the sake of doing that. And don't do that just with your own posts. Go to other people's posts that speak to you and engage with them as well. And is it going to take time? Mm-hmm. There's no way around that unless, of course, you have a team of people to do that with you, which I don't.
Well, look, I'm actually not surprised by your comment, and it just makes total sense, right? And I love the example you use, because I was actually going to think of an example of it's life, right? If we don't engage, whether it's our family, our friends, our colleagues,
Yeah.
then what are we doing? What do we do?
Mhm.
So LinkedIn is no different. So I appreciate that tip for our audience today, because I talk to a lot of people who, they're on LinkedIn, but they've never posted, they've
Yeah.
never commented. Back to where you were in the early days, and I was there too at one point. But the wonderful thing, I believe, in this, and which leads to my first question that I want to talk to you about, which is communication. I know that's something really important to you, and it's a topic you like to cover. But whether it's LinkedIn or at work or in our family, how important is engagement at a deeper level? How important is communication overall to be able to just exist in this world and then take it to the next step, which is thrive?
Mhm. I love that question, Roger. Thank you for that. Communication is obviously very important to me. I think it's the way that we truly connect with each other. And I think it's Brene Brown who has a lovely quote that I'm never going to be able to say right, but that connection is the reason why we're here,
Mm.
is being able to be a part of each other's lives and to truly listen and touch each other's lives in a way that, and I think on your profile you say it very nicely, that to have that positive impact on each life that you can. And of course we can't all achieve that all of the time, we all have our moments, but to try to strive for that, because in giving we receive back into our souls just that sense of we have a purpose, we have a mission, we have a reason for being here, and we all do. I'm, again, a visual person, so I like the idea of a kaleidoscope and all the beautiful colors that each person represents. And I like to say each one of us is our own special hue of light. And without us, the world is not quite as light and as bright and as colorful as it would be with us being here. And so connecting with other people creates that beautiful kaleidoscope of colors that when we come together. So surviving on our own, that is, really beneficial for meditation and those kinds of things. But that sense of togetherness and being able to truly connect with someone by listening, by looking them in the eye, all of those things is, I think, the reason why we're here.
Wow, I love that. What about for people who are struggling with this? Where do they start? How can we help those people?
Um, there's hope. If I can do it, you can. Let's start with that.
But you're so right. And look, both of us and
Yeah.
every single person I bring on this podcast is in the same boat, because you have
Mhm.
to start somewhere, you know.
Yeah.
And I put up a post, and sorry, then I'll let you continue, but I think it's relevant. I put up a post last week that said, "Start before you're ready."
Yes.
Start before you're ready.
Yes.
We're in this mode of perfection, and I can't put
Yeah.
myself out there. And what are people going to think? At the end of the day, I don't think people are looking that hard. But please continue.
No, no, I think that's a very good example. I like to think about the fact that, they've done a lot of research on children in schools, and when they first start, and they say the teacher says, "Oh, who here is an artist?" "Oh, I am." And then, at some point, fairly soon after kindergarten or preschool, we all say, "Oh no, I'm not creative. I can't do that." And where we get that from is society
Mm.
and this specific stereotype that says only this kind of people can do this thing. And I will say, if you had told me 10 years ago, "Oh, you're going to be on LinkedIn and you're going to have a, larger than 2 following," I'd be like, "Are you crazy? Like, what is the matter with you? Like, are you banana peels? That is not happening." And so I do think it is super important. And I did love that post of yours, is start before you're ready, is all the things that we've done. Anyone who's learned to play a musical instrument, I can promise you one of the reasons why I don't still play a violin is I don't think my father appreciated what it sounded like when I started. I'm sure I was adorable, but the sounds were
Oh,
not.
I'm sure.
Um, so the same thing applies is, when you started walking as a baby, you didn't do it well. I think that's part of the reason why diapers are so fluffy is to give us a landing pad, but we don't remember that as adults, and we think, oh no, I can't possibly do anything until I can do it perfectly right. And that really holds us back in what we are willing to try. And I like to say, when you're willing to try and do something that's scary to you and not be absolute perfection, you inspire someone else to be able to do the same. And look at all the amazing things that you have done, that however many years ago that you started on LinkedIn, if I had told you, hey, you're going to be talking to this really shy girl from, currently California, you'd be like, yeah, that's not happening. And here you are. And look at all of the value that you have created through all of the conversations you've had with all of the amazing people that you have been brave enough to invite on your show. And that's a gift you've given all of us, to be brave enough to do this.
No. You just struck the heartstrings there. No, thank you. But you're so right. And I just, every day, like you mentioned early on that when you put up your posts, you're doing it for a reason. You hope to touch one life. And I'm the same way, right? The reality is that we have the opportunity, and I almost think we have a duty to be able to do these kinds of things, not for ourselves. I mean, take the vanity out of it. Of course, it's nice to be able to grow your business and your brand and your presence and all that. All that aside, though, I believe we have a duty, and it's, to actually take the knowledge that we have and have these types of conversations so that others can benefit from it, because everyone's on a different path and they're in a different place on their path. So we're going to hopefully, touch some people today that are watching this live. And then when we rebroadcast this in a week or so, we're going to hit more people. And then 3 months from now, when I find a really nice clip that you spoke about, we're going to, you know what I mean? So that's the beauty of that. That's the creative part of what we do. But it all comes down to the original point, which is communication. If we're not talking, if we're not communicating, then what are we doing?
Yeah, exactly. Really well said. Absolutely. That's why we're here.
That's why we're here. Love that. Okay, so I have to put my glasses on to look at a couple of my notes here. Talk about, if you can, your work in leadership development. The space is crowded, as we know. Everyone has, their own way of providing, value in the space of leadership development. But if you can, take us on your journey of, before we actually get to the topic, how did you get there? How did you get to the point where you're able to help others in this field?
Oh, I think probably my story is similar to, well, from the point of coaching forward. Before that, I have a much I have a meandering story before that. But as far as getting into coaching, I think anyone who steps into the coaching arena, you come in with these sparkly big eyes and you think, oh, I'm gonna help everyone. This is gonna be so much fun. And I think probably a lot of us, you get into it and you're begging from your friends, can I coach you? Can I coach you? Can I coach you? I need so many hours to get certified. Can I coach you? And your friends will say, oh yeah, that wasn't horrible. I'll refer a friend to you, this kind of thing. And I think very similar to a lot of people getting into it and saying, oh yeah, I can coach anybody. I can help anybody. This is going to be great. And then you come across that person for whom you just really don't gel with. And you think, oh, well now, wait a minute. I'm going to stop and think about this for a minute, because that didn't go so well. And I didn't really enjoy that. And this doesn't make me feel like I'm thriving now. And so then you kind of cultivate a new understanding of who perhaps is your best person to work with and who you're able to help the best. And I do think, of course, you start to understand that there's a bit of ego involved with thinking that you can help everyone, because no one can do that. There are people for whom they don't want to laugh while they do coaching, and you really shouldn't work with me then, because I do like to work hard, and I like to say I'm a tough love cheerleader. Is I'll be your biggest fan, but you better be willing to work too, and we'll have fun, but only if you're working while we do it. So there's those two facets, and if that's not what you need someone else. And I'm going to own that right now.
Wow.
Please feel free. And if you want to reach out to me and get recommendations, I'll be happy to do that for you, because I definitely have a very specific way of doing coaching, and it's not for everyone.
Mm.
And I like the way I do coaching. It's not, for everyone. It's not the perfect thing. It's not something that's going to be the perfect match for everybody. But there's a coach out there for anybody and everybody, because there's a lot of really amazing people out there doing a lot of really great work.
Yeah. And when you talk about the client putting in the work, what does that
Mhm.
look like? What does work look like for the client who is trying to develop their skills?
So some of my clients say that my favorite four-letter word is done. That I like done. I don't want to talk about it any longer than we need to get clarity. That's fine. We can talk about it. But at the end of every conversation, you will have picked, as my client, you'll have picked your action step or steps, depending on what we're working on. And you will own that. And however I can support you from that time until the next time I talk to you, I'm happy to do that. But when we talk again and we go over how it's going with those steps, done had better be the word I hear.
And if not,
So I'm big on taking action and not just talking and planning and writing things down and everything. I want you to put it into play. And I will not reveal names, of course, because that would be completely inappropriate. But I did have a gentleman reach out to me and want to proceed with coaching with me. And so we talked in the initial call. I said, okay, so what are you going to do, tonight before you go to sleep? And, to move forward on this, whether or not you work with me. And he said, oh, well, maybe tomorrow morning. I said, no, I'm sorry. You misunderstood what I meant by today. I said, before you get to close your happy little eyes and sleep, what are you going to do to move yourself forward? And I will tell you that in the end, for a variety of reasons, he was not able to move forward with coaching for me. And that may have been why. But I will tell you, the next morning when I said, and you will text me and you will tell me what you did, before you go to sleep, I had a text on my phone saying he had done it. And so that felt good, even though he didn't turn into a client, that he understood, no, today matters. Because I think for a fair amount of us, we tend to get into that overthinking, overanalysis. How can I make this perfect before I take this first step? And sometimes just breaking through and getting that first step taken care of is what gets you moving. And from a nerdy standpoint, there's the physics law about what's in motion will continue to be in motion. It's far easier to keep moving than it is to get moving.
mm,
And so for me, it's super important that even with that first discovery call, you're going to take a step. If you called me, you're going to take a step.
yeah.
So that's something that's really, really important that all of my clients know is by the end of this call, we can talk about whatever we want. By the end of this call, you're going to pick something. And by the next call, you're going to have taken accountability and moved forward, because this is about you becoming even more amazing.
And if you had those clients that maybe start out well, but 2, 3, 4 weeks in, they're starting to go back to their old ways. Does that
Mhm.
happen? And if so, how do you help them?
I think it's important to stay on top of it. If I see some sliding that first, after the first session, that next session, we'll talk about it. And I'll say, what's getting in the way? Is there something that we need to work on from your mindset standpoint? Is that goal not realistic for you, and why? Because I like to talk about what's your reason for doing something and what will you accomplish by it. And to use the example, I'm not a weight loss coach, but it's something that a lot of people can relate to, is if you come to me and you say, I want to lose 5 pounds, I'm going to want to talk to you about why that's important to
Mhm.
you. Not just, okay, 5 pounds is the
Right.
goal, and then what? What's going to be different in your life? Why is that important to you? And being able to maintain that connection to why that's important to you. Is it, and I know 5 pounds would be a ridiculous example in this case, but is it that you have kids who are just now having, your grandkids, and you want to be there for your grandkids' wedding and be able to dance at their wedding? okay, that's your bigger reason why. It's not about the 5 pounds. It's why is this important to maintain that? And I find that's really helpful to keep people from getting into that, oh, well, this was something I was gung ho about. No, if you have something that's out there that you're taking little steps towards, and in my vernacular, I call it those plus 1% steps, is what's that tiny thing you can do today, because that's super important to me, that you can get to that bigger goal, and understanding that even if you're working on multiple goals, what's the big overarching goal that we're working towards, so that you can see by taking this step today, that's why it's important. By taking this next step tomorrow, that's why it's important. I find that helps a lot of people be able to maintain that grip. And sometimes we have that conversation. Why are we doing this again? You tell me, why is this important to you? Because that's how you're going to hang on to that motivation, that discipline. And then, of course, if you need some perhaps light pressure, a la Elaine, on your backside, I'll be happy to provide that for you in any way that we agree that that's appropriate. So
now, when you're talking to your clients, I assume you probably do a lot on Zoom. Is that right?
Yes.
Body language. How much does that factor in to what you do? Is that part of it? I'm thinking it is. You talked about eye contact earlier, but overall body language, how and where does that fit in?
So, as you and the audience has probably noticed, I am not looking down at my screen at you. I am looking at my camera, because that, for you and for the audience, perceptively means I'm making eye contact with you. Yes.
Yes.
And that's a really big deal for me, because if you think about in person, which is what we're trying to emulate here, is in person, you wouldn't stand there and, well, I hope not. If we have to cover body language at that level, that's a different conversation. But if you stand there and you're looking down at someone, maybe let's say for politeness, their shoes, unless you have a shoe fetish and you're going to compliment on their shoes and then look back up at their eyes, please, I beg of you, look at their eyes. I've done a video on eye contact and where to look and what that means. And so just for an example, thinking about a little dot somewhere in the middle of someone's forehead and their eyes, looking in that triangle is what's called a power gaze or an authoritarian gaze. It's a way of establishing, I'm in control of this conversation and I want to have an eye-to-eye, peer-to-peer. I don't see you as beneath me. I don't see you as above me. And so where body language comes into play is, I actually did a webinar on this when COVID first started ramping up, is if you are positioned on Zoom so that you're above your camera, how you appear to everybody is that you think you're better than them, that you're looking down on them. And we are all familiar with that term of someone looking down on you. This is a physical way that neurological perception occurs, is if I'm positioned above my camera, I'm looking down on you. I don't really want your interaction. And so subconsciously, the message that you're sending to someone else is, I'm here to tell you stuff. I'm not really here to talk to you peer to peer. And the opposite is true. And you'll see this a fair amount on Zoom calls where someone's positioned below their camera and they're looking up at you. And I know that there's a variety of people who like, well, my double chin, and yeah, okay. I'm appreciative of all of that. Maybe just dampen down the beauty filter on your Zoom and you'll be okay. But looking up at someone, again, gives them the perception that you think of them as above you, and they're less likely to have that peer-to-peer conversation with you. So talking to leaders, that even that is important. It does get, of course, tricky on Zoom, because in order to make yourself see the other person, you have to look down on the screen. So the little rule, if you will, or guideline is you, when you're talking, you look at your camera, and when the other person is talking, you look down at the screen at them. Now, I will tell you, just to give a couple of different eye gazes, is if you go from looking between their eyes instead of to their forehead, you look down at their mouth. Now, I will tell you, I'm someone who has lost about 70% of the hearing in my left ear. So in my conversations, I frequently, especially if it's a noisy environment, do have to look at someone's mouth. And there are some additional body language things that I then do to make sure that we don't misunderstand my intention for the conversation, which can happen. And so there are things like if I were to look down at your mouth, which I'm not going to do at this moment because it's going to be hard to demonstrate that here, but if I were to look down at your mouth while you're talking and then also tilt my head, that's a warmth indicator
Hmm.
that says this is a little bit more social and a little bit less professional. So
Hmm.
if I do have to look down, especially at a gentleman's mouth because I'm having difficulty hearing him, I will typically do okay, I'm going to show you that I'm having trouble hearing. So I'm going to turn my better ear towards you and I'm going to hold my head straight up because that's less of a warmth indicator so that there's that subconscious indication to the gentleman that no, this isn't Elaine drifting into that she'd like to know you on a different level. This is Elaine saying, I just can't hear you. So I'm trying to avail myself of the knowledge that you're trying to share with me, but in a way that doesn't say, I have a different intention for this conversation. Of
Hmm.
course, I will step gently. I will say I have a YouTube channel that I only use as a library for my videos. So I'll just reference that lightly here. And that is, there is a video there that talks about where to look. And I do have a little bit of funny humor in there for people who have a slightly nerdy sense of humor, where you can look and see the rest of the video where I talk about this. But we're not going to do that here because I don't think I could make it through live. But there is additional gazes where you look a little further down for a different kind of conversation intention.
So interesting. I mean, it's fascinating. I'm sure there's books even written about this.
Yes.
But just to give our audience, some insight, I love the fact that you said look between the eyes, right? That's a new tip. Now, in what settings would you not want to do that? More social setting, if so say you're out with your friends, and you're at dinner or whatnot. What's kind of protocol for that? Are you looking at someone's eyes? How does that play out?
So the interesting thing is I, as an introvert, I will establish what's my intention for this social interaction. And so when I go to a party, I will set the intention for what I view the evening as a quote social success will look like. Is that going to be, I learned one new thing about somebody? So that's my intention. So I make myself go talk to strangers. If that's my intention, then I can feel positive about that setting. For extroverts, I'm not one, so I really can't speak to that. But for them, it might be to talk to as many people as possible. And so light chit chat all the way around the room, getting, to shake hands or pat on the back, whatever it is your intention. Eye gazes that go with that will be dependent on what's your goal for that conversation. For someone who wants to have a very peer-to-peer or influential conversation, looking at the power triangle here is super important to maintain that. So to take a little quick sidestep, if a woman is, say, wearing a lovely piece of jewelry, a necklace that's hanging down, and a gentleman notices it, I encourage you to then bring your eyes rapidly back up, compliment her while looking into her eyes, so that it's very clear. But this triangle that goes down to the clavicle level is what's called the intimate gaze. And so that is something that typically you would reserve for an incidental compliment on a piece of jewelry and then return to the more professional gaze zone. But if you are in a social setting, to answer your question, if you're in a social setting, depending on what your goal is for that conversation, you might include that level of gazing a little bit more to indicate to the other person that your interest level may have gone into a more social or personal basis.
Interesting. Okay. Wow. There's a lot there. And thank you for all of that. And I'm sure everyone appreciates these tips that you're providing. What about voice?
That's another one of my fun things. So I do, for my speech pathology career, I do have a specialty in voice. I do call myself a voice nerd. There are certainly things that you can do with your voice to help yourself seem more credible, more competent, more confident. All of those go together with the body language. I'm going to touch just real quickly. When you're sitting on Zoom, to finish answering, because I think it was a great question. When you're sitting on Zoom, to make sure that you're not hunched over, that your body language is shoulders back, upright, because that sends a message to your own brain that I'm feeling confident and I'm feeling comfortable in this situation. And the mirror neuron response from the people on the other side of your camera who are receiving this subconscious message from you are that I can relax and feel comfortable in the situation as well. So that's
So I wouldn't want to be like this.
right. Yes, that's a little intimidating, Roger. So thank you for giving my mirror neurons a little discomfort there. So yeah, so thinking about, again, if you think about perceptively, how do you appear on screen? If that's how you would want to sit, how close to that person, and there's a lot of cultural nuances that go with this, but in general, how you would be in person is how you want to appear on screen. So if you're someone who gets super close to people, and please don't do that to me, I have a very large personal space. If you're someone who does that, that's how you want to appear on screen. And if that feels uncomfortable for you, then maybe when you go back to meeting with people in person, maybe think about that. But you also don't want to lean so far back that people feel like, do you really not want to be involved with this conversation? Is this something you don't really want? So that was a little bit of a backup in my head that I just had to get out there about that. And
before we move on, because I do have a question on that, so before I forget,
Mhm.
what do leaders do if their team, if they see some of these signs from their team? So say they're in an in-person meeting and there's 5 people around a table and one of them's, back like this, another one is just in their face. So at what point, I mean, should the leaders have one-on-one call or discussions with their team about the body language that they're seeing?
I actually think yes. I do think so, because it can create the environment amongst your team, especially with the leaning too close and the very intense gaze. Just as a side note, one of my least favorite profile photos that I see on an unfortunate amount of people's photos is where they look remarkably like if you transpose that picture onto a police lineup background, it would look perfect. Um, a lot of people aren't familiar with how they appear. And sometimes it's just that, the saying is awareness is the first step. Sometimes it's just that little nudge of, are you aware that when you are in a meeting, you appear very intimidating, you appear very cold, you appear very much like you're not into this or you're not engaged. When someone, to kind of touch back on your question, when someone is sitting there and they're doing this and they're just kind of like, and you're basically expecting the eye roll to come out after that, you can either address it in the situation as a leader. You can say, hey, so I'd love to get your thoughts on this. You look like you're really thinking about something, is an interesting way to handle it. Yeah. And typically there's a reason that person isn't engaged or is not happy. And maybe you as a leader are aware of that, or maybe you're not. Maybe it's something personal that's going on for them that is impacting their ability to participate. But I like to remind leaders, and this doesn't always fit, but I like to remind leaders, you hired that person for their skill set. Make sure they're there and they feel comfortable using it. And if there's something getting in the way, get it out of the way so that they can be that brilliant participatory member of the team. And if there's a problem, address it. I'm not a big fan of addressing things in front of other people, but sometimes a little gentle nudge, like someone's just sitting there and they're just kind of like, hey, how are you doing today? Let's maybe take a pause and everyone go around the room. How's everyone handling this week? What's going on for you? Sometimes is enough to nudge someone into, oh, I'm important here. I'm valued here. I'm appreciated. It does actually matter that I'm in this room. I'm going to say as a side note, if you're having meetings where there is no purpose, please just stop that.
Yeah.
Because if all the people in your room look like that, maybe there's a reason. But if it's just one person, then definitely check in with them. And if you need to have a private conversation, I absolutely think that's important, because if they're sitting there that way, their body language is saying, I'm not really here. And you're not going to get the best out of them, which is why you hired them.
Awesome. So back to voice.
So voice is a big thing, and the kinds of things that you can indicate through your voice is a huge variety. And I will tell you, I was actually really nervous. One of my first coaching clients said, I'm not comfortable in video. This was long before COVID. So I'm not comfortable in video. So I literally never saw the client. Never saw him in person, only did phone. And I thought, how am I going to really connect with him? Because that's very important to me, to create that safe space and that sense of connection. And to only do it over the phone felt very foreign to me. and especially being a very visual person. But the interesting thing that you can create that sense of warmth with your voice only, even if someone can't hear it. So how you sit, how you stand, if you're on a phone conversation, your voice will sound different if you're standing versus if you're
Hmm.
sitting. It will sound different. So let's say I'm talking to you and I'm like, oh, yeah, Roger, this is a great conversation. I'm really having a good time here. Now, obviously, you can see me and you can tell, and I haven't moved my body a whole lot, but just in my voice, you can hear that dripping sense of sarcasm and
Right.
boredom. Whereas if I say, Roger, I'm having a great time. I'm so excited to be here today. Thank you so much for inviting me. You hear that I actually mean that.
Mhm.
No, it's true. I do mean that. But in my voice, I do actually mean that. And so I like to give the example of there are a lot of times where we give off mixed signals. And typically, your body's not going to lie. You might lie with your voice and your words, but your body's not going to lie. So, my favorite thing as an introvert is, I'm really excited about coming to your party. Well, my voice is telling you I'm not excited, and my body is telling you I'm not excited. My words are telling you, "Oh, I'm super excited about this. Yeah, great. Thanks so much."
No
I
denying.
think I have to stay there. So there's a lot that you can say with your voice, and as a leader, if you approach your team member with things on your mind and you're not really paying attention to them, hey, how you doing today? Well, that remarkably comes across like, this is a bullet point on my agenda, and you should answer as quickly as possible so I can check this box. Whereas, Roger, how are you doing today? I've said very, very similar words,
Yeah.
but the tone, the way you use your voice is very different. Now, obviously, I tend to do the whole package of slight head tilt, where I look, all of those kinds of things. But if you're going to pick one thing, think about how your voice sounds to somebody else. I am very careful when I'm using examples, but I will say that in general, if you use your natural tone, and if you're not trying to, and this tends to be more men, I have experienced some women who do this as well, who they want to appear more masculine, so they lower their tone and they get what's called that glottal fry, that sound in your voice. That isn't your natural tone, and people will hear that, and it actually is very fatiguing to listen to. And on the opposite side, there are, and this tends to apply more to women, there are women for whom, as a child, perhaps they got a lot of attention for talking like a little girl, and so they raise their voice because it gets them attention. The problem with doing that as a woman is, in general, again, stereotypically, you're then perceived as less competent.
Hmm.
And that's a huge disservice to all of the education that you may have and all of the competencies that you may have if the way you talk doesn't sound like someone should actually listen to you. So I had one of my coaching classmates point out to me that at the time when I first started coaching, I, of course, wasn't as confident in coaching material as I was in speech pathology material. And she said, do you realize the difference in how you sound when you're talking about speech pathology things versus coaching things? And I
Mhm.
thought, no, that is true. Because in general, if we get nervous or if we get excited, I will tell you when I get super excited about something, I can be mistaken for a hyperactive 2-year-old. Where I'm super excited, oh my gosh, and that kind of thing. And I do try to be careful about that. But in thinking about how you're coming across with your voice, you can betray yourself and how you're feeling, because physiologically, anatomically, what happens inside of our voice box, our larynx, if you want the medical term for it, is that when we get nervous, our vocal cords tighten, they lengthen and they tighten. And that's similar to a guitar string. And that is, you'll get a much higher note. So
Okay.
when someone talks at a higher pitch,
Mhm.
for whatever the reason is, they are seen as more nervous, less confident, less competent. And it's just that subconscious perception of that. So if you are out there, someone who has a particularly high voice, you might want to use this one little tip. And I'm super happy to have a quick conversation with anybody who wants to do this with somebody who this is their thing. Is a quick way to tell where is my natural vocal tone is have someone talk to you, and the only way you respond is to go, mm-hmm, mm-mm, mm-hmm. And that sound, those two notes, when you're relaxed and you're not thinking about it. So that's why it's important to have someone else do it with you. That's your natural vocal range.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There you go, Roger. Very nice. Well done. Well done. So if you come out of that and you go, okay, and what I wanted to talk about next, nope,
Yeah.
bring it down. And if you've come out of the and you're going, and then I want to talk to you about this, nope, that's not where you're at either. And both of those are what I call vocal abuse behaviors, if you want to know. You're doing something naughty to your voice, and don't do it. And don't let me hear you do it either.
So interesting. Now, what about the employee who is getting tone from the manager that is quick, or you're bothering me, like the opposite of what you talked about before? How does the subordinate handle that?
This is a delicate area because it depends on, I think the appropriate term to use here is the psychological safety that you have at work and what kind of relationship you have with that person.
Okay.
If you have the kind of relationship where you can go to them and say, and I would do this in private, I wouldn't do this in front of other people, just, hey, boss person, are you okay? Start with that. Start with treating them like they're a person. And then if they say, yeah, why? Because that's very likely to be a response. Well, I've noticed that recently you're a little bit shorter in your responses. And I just, as an employee who wants to do their best work, want to make sure that there's nothing that I need to do to improve upon. But if there's something that you're extra stressed about, is there a way we as your team can support you so you can do your best work? Because right now I really want to support you, and I'm feeling that there's something going on. And if you don't want to share, that's fine, but we just want you to know we care about you as a person. That can be a very empathetic, compassionate way to handle that. Whether or not that's a kind of person that you feel comfortable saying that to will depend on the person, but definitely managers, leaders, they're people too. And sometimes, as much as a leader tries to hold it together, there is, in body language terminology, leaks and tells that our bodies give off. And vocal tone is one of those. And certainly, I know when I'm super stressed and someone calls me or something, I'm like, yeah, okay, yep. Like, let's get this moving. Like, I have boxes to check, and this is not one of them. And so I will catch myself and say, whoa, okay, slow down. This person has reached out to me, and you picked up the phone, so you owned that this was a conversation you were going to have.
Good one. Yes, I'm glad you said that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So be there, be present, and own it. And if you weren't going to have that conversation, don't pick up the phone.
Right. Anything else about voice tone that we should be aware of? I have a few more topics I wanted to go into, but I didn't want to abandon the topic because I know it's something that
it's such a nerdy thing for me. There's a lot that I can say about this. I'm very conscious of that there are a lot of reasons why people will speak the way that they do. Sometimes those are anatomical, like if someone has a repaired cleft palate specifically. So I do like to be very, very careful to step in gently. But if there is something that you notice when you meet someone new that they seem to be paying extra attention to, it might be something that maybe you should address. Because if there is something that you are doing with your body or with your voice that is causing someone to pay more attention to how you're saying it or what you're doing, then that may be getting in the way of your messages. And I'm being very, very subtle here, but there are things that people will do. I will use hopefully a not very personal one, which is if you're someone who does something repetitively. I'm going to give the example of one of my university professors had, to the point where I still remember to this day, I remember nothing else that man said, but as he was giving his lectures, he would say, okay, talk, okay, talk. And I remember nothing he said absolutely nothing. I remember that. And I remember getting out of that 90-minute class and almost having a twitch because I thought, I just don't ever want to hear that again. And I know we all do those filler words. You've heard me do them. So it's not that any of us are perfect. But if there is something that you notice that you're doing, maybe that's something you can work on. So it's not something that stands in the way of the communication that you're trying to have with someone else.
And okay, I love this conversation. What about us as individuals? What if there's things about others that bother us? For example, I was in the car with my son earlier today, and he kept cracking his knuckles, and it was, and he cracks them, and it bothers me. So how should I? I mean, I said, can you please not crack your knuckles? And I probably didn't say it that nice. How do you suggest how would I handle that situation, or what's the best way to handle that situation?
Oh, because that is a big thing for me. I definitely do not prefer that sound. It is something, and the reason I laughed is because I actually had a conversation earlier this week with someone who, as they were getting on the call, said, I was actually really nervous to make this call. And I said, oh, and he said, because you're a speech therapist. And I started laughing. He goes, I'm worried about my elocution already. I said, well, so far you're doing fine. But it is something that when people know that about me, and then you add the body language training thing and the voice thing, and I'm apparently intimidating to talk to. So I will say that in that specific case, obviously, I'm not going to step on your toes. I don't have children. I have huge respect for people who do have children, and you will know how to handle your son better than me. But in general, with a person who's doing something that maybe perhaps is annoying for you, and maybe you think that they're not aware of that, is to say, I'm just wondering, are you aware that you do that? And are you aware of the impact that it has on people around you?
Mm.
And is there something else that perhaps out of respect for our relationship that maybe you could do instead that might be more palatable for both of us? Is a way that I might handle that. It will depend. I can promise you I never spoke to that professor about the thing that he did. And I think now I would say, excuse me, sir, may I speak to you after class today? Because my ability to handle that has come to a new low.
That's
but
right.
at the time when you're in your teens, you don't do that. But now I would say, ask your son, what does that provide for him? Is it a nervous thing? Is it something that you're doing that makes him nervous? I'm not
That's probably what it is.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step into that, Roger. But is there an environmental thing? Is there something he's worried about? Is there something he's stressing about at school or with a friend? Is there a girl he likes? Oops, didn't mean to mention that, Roger.
Yep.
Is there something going on with them that maybe they're doing that and they don't realize it, and you can be of help to them? So you can handle it several different ways. I tend to get at the why, and how you do that, I think, in the nicest possible way is the best way to connect with someone else. I will say that I have spoken to people for whom they were doing unusual things with their voice or their gestures or something, and not in front of somebody else, to say, are you aware of this? Because my concern for you is that it might be holding you back in how you're seen by others.
Wonderful. Wow. What value you're providing here today. I thank you so much. Couple last items. One other topic that I know is very important to you, neuroscience. Right? What is it for those like me who know nothing about it? And how does that play into your world and your role as a coach?
So I'm going to start by telling a little funny story on myself. Is the very first person I met in person, and this was a huge deal for me, to meet a stranger that I only knew online. was this lovely woman. And so we met at a coffee shop, and she had said to me, "Oh, I'm so excited to talk to you about neuroscience." And I was like, "Oh, that's great. I'm super excited about neuroscience." And I learned a very valuable lesson that day. And that is that if you start the conversation as someone who has gone to a medical school for a week-long intensive course in actually dissecting human brains, that is not what most people mean when they say they're excited about neuroscience. And the look on her face was more like, I'm going to expel the contents of my interior before this conversation is over. And fortunately, because I pay attention to other people's body language, I realized, oh, how about we start with what did you mean by neuroscience? And we'll talk at that level. So I do have a more nerdy approach to it, but it is something that's very fascinating to me. The term, metacognition and meta-linguistics is, thinking about thinking and talking about talking and thinking
Yes.
about talking and all of those kinds of things. Super fascinating for me that just, for example, just the difference of how people talk about something will change what their neurochemistry is inside of them. If I said to you, Roger, I am super nervous about having this conversation with you. What I have done to myself is I've actually given myself a little brain bath of cortisol, the stress hormone. And that, for me as a woman, will reside with me for up to the next 24 hours.
Hmm. Wow.
And that's just by the words that I've said.
Wow.
And so it's very, very important to me that when I'm working with clients that I bring that in as an example of the words you choose, how you choose to talk about something, and yourself specifically is super important, because you can either be literally on a neurochemistry level holding yourself back, or you can be helping yourself move forward. Because if instead I said in as close to the similar tone, Roger, I'm really excited about this conversation with you. Now, that's a weird way for me to say it, but I was trying to match my vocal tone. But just using that term, what I have sent a message to my brain is, this is something I'm looking forward to.
Mhm.
And now I'm getting a little boost of maybe even adrenaline. So now I'm even more excited about it. And how I'm sitting makes a difference. So all of it comes together for me in a super incredibly nerdy way. And I will bring all of those pieces into my coaching to help people recognize sometimes there are little things that you're doing that can actually be holding you back. If you're a public speaker or a leader who does a lot of public speaking, and I'm going to back up just for a second here, if you're gripping the podium with the death grip, the message you're sending to your body is, I'm not really comfortable in this space, and I need this for security, and I can't move away from it. And that's going to start impacting the way that you're able to talk. And it actually impacts how much you're able to remember of what you wanted to say. So that whole my mind just went blank thing, it's actually a neurochemistry, a neurochemical, a neuroscience approach that your body is saying, I'm doing the fight, flight, or freeze thing. And
Yes.
what just happened was I just froze. And I went, and it's kind of quote all over at that point. Whereas if you can say, I'm really excited to be here and I'm having a great time, and you loosen your grip, even just purposefully making yourself do that will tell your body, I'm feeling more comfortable. And it sends that happy little message up that says, I'm feeling more comfortable. And then you are more comfortable.
Wow. Wow. And I love earlier how you said, um, thinking about thinking and
Mhm.
talking about talking. I've never really heard that, but it's so true.
Mhm.
If and as you were explaining that, the one word that kept coming to me, because there's so much to all this, right? If we don't talk about this type of thing on a regular basis, which most of us don't, except for you, professionally, which is a good thing. Um, it's almost like, wow, that there's so much to just a conversation
Yeah.
that I would have never even thought of. But the one word that comes to me is awareness. And I wanted to
Mhm.
get your perspective on that, because that's something that I've been trying to do, say, for the last 5 years, is really become aware and present in my conversations and actually listen to what the person is saying, not thinking about, okay, I know I have two more questions to ask Elaine. What are they going to be? No, I'm
Yeah.
really trying to listen. But is that part of the approach with all of this, is being aware?
Mhm. Absolutely. We send out so many messages, and the research varies widely on whether it's 65% or 97%. I've heard, I think that's probably a little bit high, but the amount of information that we send out, and for a lot of us that we're completely unaware of that. I will not say it the way that colloquially we might say, but to be respectful, I will say a lot of us have a resting facial expression that some of us aren't aware of. And I will tell you, getting on Zoom and working with clients, I discovered that if Zoom is going to freeze, it's going to be when I have that look on my face. And it's very intimidating looking. It's not supportive. I am listening to you, but I'm listening to you kind of the way maybe a neurosurgeon is thinking about how to dissect your brain. And that's very intimidating. And so I had to become aware based on seeing that look and having actually a couple of clients go, you know, oh dear goodness, you're frozen and you look very intense. I thought, okay, that's good feedback from me.
Yeah,
To
my wife tells
become
me my resting face is, like this, the frown. Why are you
yes,
frowning? What are you angry about? Nothing.
exactly.
I'm concentrating. I'm
Yes, I'm
intense.
concentrating. Yes, I'm intensely concentrating. Well, don't do that in my direction. Yes. So that was feedback I had to actually have.
Hmm,
So
interesting.
now I very, very intentionally will say there's going to be a lightly pleasant look on my face all the time so that when Zoom freezes,
Yep.
I can have that be the look on my face. So I do tend to have just that very slight smile. I tend to have a slight head tilt just to make sure that that's internal. It doesn't always work, of course. There's that moment when you choose to do something and that's when it's going to freeze. But in general, if it's going to freeze or in person, when we get back to being in person, to recognize that. And then please, I beg of you, for all of your audience, if your profile photo looks like that, please consider what that message is that's sending out to everybody who's looking at your profile. That's very intimidating, that's very scary, and that's not warm and welcoming and not approachable. And so really to think that those are the messages that we're sending out, and to be really, really aware of that is super, super important, because it's something that, again, you would think, oh, she's a communications specialist and all of this kind of thing. I have certifications out the craziness, but I don't know everything. I'm not aware of everything that I do. And so I even check myself. I watch videos back and think, oh my word, I didn't realize I was doing that. Oh goodness, I need to work on that. And so those kinds of awareness is super important. And that's one of the things that a coach can help you be aware of. You think about a soccer coach for children, that they're running all over and they're doing crazy things, and maybe they're swinging their leg out as they're running. They might not be aware of that. And if that becomes an ingrained habit, they're going to be even less aware of that. So bringing that to someone's attention can be that gift to them as a leader, to say, you're actually scaring the daylights out of your team, because you get into those meetings and you're like, yes, what would you like to share today? And they're like, nothing. I've got nothing to say here. No, whatever you think, but we're good. I just want out of this room. And that can be a huge disservice to you and your company and the safety of your team. And them being able to bring ideas to you is you being aware. What are the messages that you're sending out when you're just sitting there?
Wow. Great stuff. So thank you so much for that. If people want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to connect? If they say, I want to hire Elaine.
Well, thank you for that. So LinkedIn is where you can find me. I like to say, look for the red hair and the big smile and you'll know you found me. But it is at Elaine Jacques on LinkedIn. And be happy to talk to anybody who has questions.
Awesome. Last question I have, I ask every guest this. You still have a lot of life to live, but I love to ask people about their living legacy and what legacy they want to leave. When your work is done here, what do you want your legacy to be?
My legacy, as I mentioned earlier, I don't have children. So my legacy, and this is something that I love, is I want to know that I did my best to make a positive impact on each person's life I interacted with, whether that's just as a person walking by and who smiled at them to acknowledge, I see you. You're another person on the planet. And so that is my legacy. And that is something that I think about on a regular basis. I will tell you, it comes from my work, working in hospitals where sometimes I was the last face that someone saw during their time on this planet. And just knowing that as their eyes closed, my face at them was smiling and helping them feel safe as they left. And so that is where it comes from. It's maybe a little unusual and sounds morbid to some people, but for me, it's we don't know how long our time here is. So strive to be the best version of yourself that you can be with what you know, and then add that 1% and do better tomorrow.
Wow. Elaine, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation. I so appreciate it. I feel like we connected, really well today. I hope you felt that from me. Welcome to the American Real family. And I cannot wait to continue to watch all of your wonderful content that you put out and all the great things you do for this world.
Thank you so much, Roger, and same for you. I always love seeing what you're up to and the insights that you're bringing as well. So thank you for the value that you share.
Thank you.